My name is Mallory. If you can't tell from my accent, I am American. I rarely wear red, white, and blue. Sorry, Tampa, you had really cool onesies a couple of weeks ago. And you might have seen me a couple of weeks at Mission Days. The good news, if you like cats, is that there's going to be a whole lot less dogs in this presentation. So that's my husband. Yeah. So basically, over the last 6 months, I tried counting it up a couple weeks ago, around 200 Wisers, mostly sitting down like face-to-face through exit interviews, through Wiser Pulse. I've talked to a whole bunch of engineers, especially those who are newer, and I've learned actually quite a lot. One of the things that occurred to me recently is that when I talk to people, I normally get a snapshot of just one place where they're at in their TransferWise journey. So it's kind of like they're stuck in time, just on one step. But occasionally I get to talk to people more than once, and so I kind of get to see them in different places. So there's this guy, his name is Chen. He is in our London office, and I kind of made some realizations with him because I talked to him when he started, like 3 months later, 3 months after that, and then recently, and he has been on a different stage of the journey each time. So basically, I realized that for him, it's been a 3-stage journey, and actually his stages quite reflect basically what we often experience at TransferWise. Stage 1 is mostly just freak out. So sorry, all of you newbies, I see your stickers. So once you start your jobs, this is kind of what it's going to feel like. And that generally gets better around somewhere 3, 4, 5 months in. George said it got better after a year. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But basically, you start saying things like this. It's really hard to find what I need. Autonomous teams don't work. TransferWise needs more structure. Our products fit together. How? I feel so stupid. Everyone else gets it but me. How do people get stuff done in this company? And you know what? I'm not sure I'm going to survive. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Chen said that last statement, and I've heard it more than once. So basically, people feel overwhelmed by the amount of information, by the company, by their role, by everything is different. They feel unsure. Am I making the right decision? Is this a good idea? Like, holy shnikes. And they often feel incompetent too. So on behalf of people with hearts, that sucks. And I'm sorry about that. That's a sad panda, which is not quite as cool as the little emoticon, but it is cute. But the good news is that we do actually all go through it. Almost every person I know goes through this at some point. They feel incompetent, they feel unsure. But the good news is that, so if you were in this stage 1, if you're going like, oh my gosh, that's totally me, which by the way, every time you change to a new role or team, you do go through this stage again. Sorry about that. Actually, the best thing you can do is wait it out because it does often get better, which is kind of frustrating because you feel like I should be able to do something, but really just waiting is going to be what you're going to need to do, just like patience with yourself. So if you're on a team and you have someone that's new, AKA someone in stage 1, I would suggest something called pairing rather than mentoring. And this is something that I actually found from engineers. So mentoring, there's a teacher and there's a learner and there's a power dynamic, and you don't realize it if you're a mentor. But the new person is afraid to ask questions because they're afraid to bother the really important mentor because they're in the middle of something. But with pairing, what it is it's literally 2 developers at the same computer with 2 different keyboards working on the same thing. And so the power dynamic is quite different. So they're working on the same project and they don't feel scared to ask the other person a question. So what it also does is it builds trust quite quickly. The old people can see how good the new people are, and the new people can see that they can trust their team members. So it builds trust, and it's really, really cool. And if you're a lead and you have new Wisers, something else that I learned from engineers, if you don't already, try doing something called retros. A lot of the engineers who were new said this was one of the most helpful tools for them. Because what happens is that when they were on a team where the team talked about, okay, here's what we plan to do, here's what we actually got done, here's why we didn't get this stuff done, then the team members were able to see, one, if I fail, it will be okay, I won't be fired, because these people are failing too. And the other thing that it does is it helps them navigate and figure out, what do I do when I run into an obstacle? Because what do my team members do? So it's really, really cool. But let's move on to stage 2. So stage 2, I call acceptance. That can start as early as month 3, or again, as George said, a year in. Some people don't get here, but most of us do. So I can find some stuff, but honestly, there's a lot that I can't. Autonomous teams are a pain. TransferWise structure is weird. I get the general gist of our product. Okay, I can't know everything. That's okay. There becomes an acceptance with that. Getting stuff done here is hard. I think I'll be okay though. TransferWise is mostly great. So we move from overwhelmed to acceptance. So there's a lot of information and it's going to be okay because I just can't know it all. We become more confident. We become more competent. So yeah, most of us get here and most of us actually stay here. TransferWise structure is still a bit of a mystery, and we aren't sure how we can get stuff done, especially if it involves more than one team. Yeah, exactly, if it's cross-teamwork. Also, meeting new wisers still feels overwhelming and hard, and we might feel stuck, which, yeah, sucks. But before you get too cozy, remember there is actually one more stage, but a lot of us never make it to it. I call it thriving. So it starts, I'm not sure when. I think for Chan, it started about 8 or 9 months in. I don't know when it started for me. So if I need it, you know what? I'll find it. Autonomous teams are quite fascinating. TransferWise structure is unique. I know enough about our product. I don't need to know everything. I know how to get stuff done here. And I enjoy working at TransferWise. So we become unbothered, we become bold, and we feel competent. So is this magic? Is this rainbows? I know a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't think that's possible, thanks. But it is actually totally possible, which is why I ask for some advice. Okay, I know maybe I was supposed to talk about Wiser Pulse, but the good news is I've actually already been talking about Wiser Pulse the whole time. So in Q3, which by the way, this is our company survey that we do quarterly, the biggest frustration for us was communication and documentation, which is really honestly a side effect of autonomous teams. And in Q4, the biggest thing we wanted to work on was strategy and prioritization, which again is basically an effect of autonomous teams. So most of us are in stages 1 and 2, which is likely why autonomy can feel painful. So that makes sense. So is there a road? Yes. There is a road, but it's going to take, honestly, a lot of hard work for some of us. So as a side note, before we begin, autonomy is this magical buzzword that is either great or scary or somewhere in between. But autonomy does depend on some things. So I call this the autonomy sandwich. I made it up. I know it's ugly. Sorry about that. But basically, autonomy only works if you have a foundation of trust and mutual respect. And basically, you do that through relationships and communication. But for example, if you're a lead and you do not trust the wisers on your team to make the right decisions, autonomy is not going to work. And if you're a wiser and you feel like your lead doesn't trust you, then autonomy doesn't work. And same thing, if teams don't trust each other, autonomy doesn't work. So in the right conditions, autonomy can actually work, which is really cool. But because some of the people are going like, this doesn't work for me, and there may be a reason why. But basically, if you don't build a lot of relationships, it's not going to work. If you don't communicate, it's not going to work. If you don't build trust, it won't work. And if you don't give trust, it won't work. And if you don't give respect, it won't work. So as you know, or might have guessed, this does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of relationships. It takes a lot of talking to people. Like I talk to people at the coffee machine. I might run into you at some point and introduce myself maybe for the 3rd time. Sorry about that. And I'll say, hi, I'm Mallory. I don't know who you are. What do you do? Okay, maybe that's too fluffy. So I'm going to go back to Chen. So I asked Chen for some advice because he literally went through these stages. I heard so many of these words come out of his mouth and it was amazing. And so he said he realized that it was possible to basically get to stage 3 because he was spending time with some smart people who did not seem to be bothered about autonomous teams like he was. And so he realized maybe it's possible. So he started watching what they were doing. One of the things he said is, if you can do this, try resolving things without a lead, because this is how autonomous teams works, in the sense that, so for example, if I'm building a presentation, I built this presentation today, and Jeff, my lead, did not make it. At the end, I did say, can you make sure that this isn't ridiculous? And he did, which is really nice. But I tried to do it without a lead. Also, experiment to find what works and what doesn't. So a lot of times we'll try something and it fails, and then we just get angry. But what Chen did is he experimented, it failed, and then he felt like, this is a learning. This doesn't work. Let me try something different. So just kind of like we do A/B testing for a product, he did A/B testing for figuring out how to work with teams. And this is a piece of advice from Helmydra. She told me, it is much harder to tell Mallory, the human being who's fun that I've spent time with, no, than it is Mallory, the competent person on Slack. So she told me basically it's really important to start being human and to spend time with people, because that's the most important way to build relationships and basically make it at TransferWise. And I found that to be true. Okay, maybe it's still too fluffy. So the good news is in Q4 of Wiser Pulsed, I asked this question of like, how do you see your team or other teams trying to solve communication or documentation stuff? And I got tons and tons of answers, which was really cool. But basically, this is all of us, or this is my attempt of having all of us crowdsource ideas of how do we navigate this autonomy stuff. So a couple of my favorites. One of them is from Tom Davies. He was the Aussie with the blazer earlier. There's this thing on Confluence that's called DACI decision pages. Don't ask me what it means. I don't know. It's something important. But anyway, so if you're working cross-team, it's really helpful because, for example, you might have 4 different options and you can lay out and almost communicate through these pages. Pros and cons, when is your time, how did you make your decisions, stuff like that. It's really, really quite cool. And you can see a little link at the bottom. I'll put that in the Slack channel later. And then also for cross-office teams. Something that I really loved is that the North American team, they started doing it that rather than, I think it was like bi-weekly meetings, they would replace one of the bi-weekly meetings with people from the team meeting with someone from within the team, but in another office, to kind of try to bridge some of the gaps between the cross-office thing, which was really, really neat. So again, we're all kind of trying to navigate this together. So I'm going to put these links in there, but I've sent them to you already. But these are basically the documentation and the communication ideas that you came up with. Don't try to do them all. That's overwhelming. But try to do maybe one if it sparks your fancy and it seems like it will work for you. So yeah, that's about it. As a goodbye, we do have a poll. Kirill just put it in there so you can see where maybe you and other people are. Well, it's anonymous of what stage you think you're in. So that's it.